Right, okay, good morning. Welcome to the panel. So, as you can see, chasing attention in the decision economy. So today we're here to talk about Tapestry. And the story we're going to tell is of positive proof point for the industry. And it's something that's been debated for a long time, but has rarely had the courage, or us as an industry and brands have rarely had the courage to act on. And that is around brand investment as demand creation for growth. So I'm delighted to be joined by two lovely individuals. So Kylene Campos, sitting directly here, is a Senior Vice President for Brand and Growth for Asia Tapestry. So please give her a warm welcome. And sat to her left is Aaron Bockstein. So he is the Australia, New Zealand Director and APAC Executive Sponsor for agencies and partners at YouTube. So please give him a warm welcome as well. So we've got a fun-packed agenda for you, but I want to start with a quote I heard earlier this week from the Coach CMO. So she was on stage, and I think it sets the tone of what we want to be talking about, which is, and I'll read the following. So, you can't performance market your way into relevance, right? So performance is merely a mirror that reflects existing demand rather than creating new demands. And I feel the implication for that quote is really significant for what we're talking to today. So Tapestry recently has ripped up the rule books and replaced it with an entirely new playbook. And we're going to talk to Kylene a little bit about that. And that sits in direct conversation with a new piece of research that we've just released exploring the intersection of culture and commerce. So I'll set the context on the research, and then I'm going to pull a few findings, 5 findings from the research, and then we're going to discuss and debate together. So just to set the context, so this is the research. So we recently conducted this. It's the first of its kind in Asia. It's 7 markets across Southeast Asia, including India. So we explored 72 cultural territories, identified what we're calling cultural playgrounds. We looked at attitudes and purchase behaviors, mapped those across 5 key categories. So those being beauty, travel, fashion, active lifestyle, and entertainment. So specifically relevant for what we're going to talk to you today with you. So the study was built with one question to answer, basically, which was what kind of cultural participation actually led to commercial outcomes. So there's a connection between culture and commerce here. So with that in mind and the context set, we're going to dive deep into the questions of the findings and open it up for discussion. So the first finding I want to open up to is this. The majority of marketers want to build brands through culture. I mean, that's true, right? But almost the same number are unwilling to surrender control of their brands to those cultural demands. Right? So that's not a strategic tension. I think that's more of a brand kind of paralysis. So the question, we'll start with you, Kylene. So you run brands that live in culture. And one of your brands, Tapestry Brands, Coach, alone has multiple cultural kind of reinventions. When you hear this stat, 82% of CMOs are afraid to give up control, what specifically are they afraid of? And actually, what did Tapestry have to let go of to get where you are now?
Sure. So I'll be honest, and I'll include myself in this fear. I actually don't think that we were afraid of giving up control. I think that was not the fear. I think the fear was in chasing culture that we would appear like everyone else. You know, and in luxury and in beauty, there is this temptation to kind of go for the same thing, like the same trend, the same playbook, the same influencer playbook, the same what's in my bag trend, the same get ready with me trend, and the fear of, you know, just kind of blending into the sea of sameness. So we didn't give up control per se, I think, but we tightened focus and discipline on the job to be done, the spaces to be a part of, the conversations to join, really all linked to the brand intent.
And you've been hugely successful at doing that. Aaron.
So, in reflection of this question, why do you think this is the case? Well, I think where we're starting to see marketers shift in the right direction, which has been a bit of a legacy behavior, is that creators have often been seen as a distribution path versus collaborators. And I think when we consider the role a creator can play as an extension of the custodianship of a brand. It starts to shift the gears in terms of the sense of authenticity, the point of connection. But there is still this sort of reticence, I think, from a broad base of the marketing community to actually embrace creators as more than just a point to distribute content. I think one of the biggest risks we fall into is this sense of a need to control, and that by affording a third party like a creator to carry that control is the diminishing of that control from a marketing organization, which is just not the case. If you think about the greatest brand partnerships in history, it's about understanding the equity of one brand and the equity of another, and how the two can actually be 10 as opposed to less. And I think we've got to start thinking about that ecosystem as brands in their own right. And what is it you're actually leveraging by engaging with them? I think the work we did, particularly with Coach and YouTube, Hayley Pham, great example, incredible creator, but an incredible brand in her own right.
Yeah.
And she was launching a book at the same time as there was an opportunity to create an association between the Coach brand and her. And the success of that came through because it was about leveraging assets, right? It wasn't just about talk about our bag, right? It was way more than that.
That's brilliant. And thank you for bringing up the Hayley Pham example, because it's actually a great example of both of what you've been talking about, which is around the bravery to collaborate. And it's not an option, it's essential going forward. Okay, wonderful. So finding number 2, this is a bit of a mouthful, the parasocial paradox, right? Which is basically craving emotional closeness without requiring kind of the real interaction, which is an interesting finding and was somewhat counterintuitive which came out of the research. So I'll give you a bit of context for it. So Gen Z has redefined cultural participation. So the stat here is 69% are watching culture rather than necessarily actively participating in it. They crave the proximity to culture, but they're not necessarily over the present, right? So with that context, so Colleen, question. So you've been publicly very strategic about going after Gen Z as the priority segment for Tapestry. So how are you navigating this shift towards what you could call passive cultural engagement? But does it change how you design communications? Does it change how you design your creative? And does the brief look different when the audience is kind of watching rather than doing?
I mean, I'll say that the brief has not changed. Maybe it's a little bit provocative, but we all have this temptation to follow what we can measure and what is visible, and a like and a comment that's very visible, and we all try to seek for that engagement metric. At the same time, what we see in luxury or even in beauty is there's a lot of quiet lurking.
True.
People quietly screenshot,
Yeah.
people watch, people then move into a different platform, create a mood board for style expression. People come into our stores with screenshots of what they've seen online. So it's a different kind of engagement in some way. And so we don't brief for engagement. Of course, engagement is important, but we brief for intent. And can you shift that consumer towards our brand in a way that feels relevant?
Yeah, I love that, silently lurking. But it's so true. You're absolutely right. The screenshot examples, totally on point. So Aaron, you sit on a significant body of behavioral data in your job. How does the parasocial participation actually show up what you see in terms of the platform, and what should brands be reading differently to take advantage of that?
You mean Google, right? Not me physically on the...
Yes, right, yes.
Yes. So we do. And I think what's coming through, or at least what we're seeing, is there is this common misnomer that social equals viral and vice versa, and they're not the same thing.
Right.
And I think that we have created a bit of a lexicon around social needs to have viral hits, right? What we would refer to as kind of marketing dopamine, right? You're getting that kind of return real quick. But the reality is, when it comes to a Gen Z audience in particular, it's storytelling that wins, right? And I want to be really clear around this idea around social not equaling viral, because I think we have also assumed that the social consuming experience is a scrolling experience. And that's not necessarily the case either.
Right.
So if storytelling is at the heart, what we're seeing with the Gen Z audience in particular is they are emotionally engaged. They are actively watching something for an extended period of time. And that sense of connection, depth, loyalty to a creator is starting to shift this idea that we need to focus on storytelling as the anchor tenant of an effective social strategy.
Right.
And not to say that short form isn't valuable, because it absolutely is, and there's ways to actually tell a story that way as well. But if we cast our minds back to before social was kind of the prevailing media type of a campaign or an always-on activation, you'll remember an asset would always be cut down to speak to different audiences. This is the same. It's about how do you make the format cut down to engage with different audiences in different ways. And again, with the Gen Z audience, that sense of knowing your audience, knowing what their appetite and interest is, how to adapt the asset, which is a creator-born asset,
Yes.
to actually speak to that audience, but then give them the long-form immersion,
Yeah.
is true engagement.
And I think that's totally right. I mean, I think from our point of view, obviously we work a lot with you and YouTube, but we're seeing such a resurgence in YouTube as an entertainment platform, and I think it's true to the storytelling mechanics that you were talking
And the adjacency of it as well.
Yeah,
So if you've gone after a specific creator that is identifying as a specific creator type, like a fashion creator, that's not to say that same story can't then continue on in different types of creators as well.
Absolutely. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, for Tapestry, for Coach, purpose and storytelling around courage to be real is a big priority for us. And it's necessarily a story that's best told in long form.
Yeah.
And so we've been very deliberate about which platforms lend itself to the best experience.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the best engagement to be able to deliver that story. And that's where there's been a big fit with, message and platform. And in the end, we didn't, engagement is important, but actually we measure brand lift.
Yeah. And I think, for me, one of the striking things about Tapestry is just the single-minded focus on that platform as well, which I think takes bravery in itself, because the risk or is to kind of spread yourself too thin. But that laser focus actually takes bravery, I think. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, which leads us actually quite nicely to the third finding here. So meme culture is real, of course. Like viral moments are real. We all experience them, we all see them. But here's an interesting stat, which actually surprised me as well. The majority of purchase decisions are still built slowly through kind of repetitive engagement, through that storytelling over time that we've just been speaking about, through earned familiarity, and through accumulated trust. And trust, I think, is a big key word that we'll probably latch onto. But I was surprised by the 19%, and I would have expected it to be higher, which raises an uncomfortable question, right? Is the industry's obsession with the viral moment causing it to underinvest in what I would call structural brand work that actually makes the viral moment mean something when it does arrive? So, question, Kylene, you've had genuine viral cultural moments in your various roles, but you also run a business that requires consistent brand building across seasons, across markets, across categories. So how do you think about the relationship between the viral spike and the slow priming the brand work that needs to happen underneath it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that for every brand builder, for every marketer, there is always that temptation and desire deep inside to go viral. I've felt it myself. Every time we write a brief, we issue a brief, we hope and pray like it goes viral. I can speak to that. But I think the reality is that should not be what drives the briefing process.
Yeah.
And there is such underweighted value on the power of good fundamentals and really unearthing a consumer insight that links to cultural phenomenon, that links to what the brand is trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think if you get that right, you do have a viral moment. So, I'll speak to the recent case of Coach, Explore Your Story. And for those of you who've caught it, it was featured at the Rotund on Tuesday.
Yes, right, yeah.
And our CMO, June, talked about the bag charms.
Yeah.
And bag charms are a cultural phenomenon for personal expression and, personalization. But we could have played that trend and just appeared like everyone else. I think the quiet truth underneath was, this insight that Gen Z is reading much more as a way to find themselves and self-express, which had a natural, strong linkage to Coach's belief in self-expression and courage to do that. And so the collaboration with the book charms,
Right.
you know, kind of in a, you wear what you read and who you are becoming, then became that hit.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm feeling a theme here. So, Erin, is there an inherent tension between how platforms are designed, i.e. the algorithms that reward the spikes, and what brands actually need for long-term priming? Put you on the spot a little bit.
On behalf of all the platforms,
Your platform specifically.
not all algorithms are created equal. So I'll speak to YouTube. But before I do that, the heart of the success that actually we've seen in the partnership between Coach and YouTube has been this departure away from short-term hitting to long-term desire, right? And so I think it's been acknowledging that there is value totally in a spike, but if it isn't primed with a structural approach to what the long-term game is that, again, anchors on storytelling, it fails.
Yeah.
Or it's a very short-term return. Look, what we're seeing the most is, like, particularly when it comes to like the algorithmic spike, if you don't have this consistent play that's kind of underpinning everything all the time, you're waiting to catch lightning in a bottle,
Right.
which is a disaster for the effort of your marketing team,
Yeah.
right? And it's enough to kind of consider how you can culture hack if something's happening and how quickly you can move around it. But then are you agile enough to capture that either?
Yeah.
So if you're relying on a cultural moment to happen versus being ingrained in the culture, you're never going to get ahead, right? And so underpinning that with consistency of what is your story, your identity, who are those architects that are working with you to ensure it's being taken forward, and developing trust kind of makes the spikes of culture a nice blip that comes along the way,
Got
but
it.
not your consistent play.
Love it. Authenticity. Love that. It's brilliant. Thank you both. Okay, point number 4. So the finding number 4. So we've heard for years, right? We've heard this for years. The funnel has collapsed. Yes, we know. We know that. We're all aware of that. But here's what the data actually shows, at least from the research that we're pulling forward. Culture is now the shortest path from thinking to buying. Okay? So 89% of consumers, and this is the stat here, have purchased something they first encountered through culture. Right? So social proof is part of that story and part of that narrative that we were talking about, the storytelling. But it's not the only part. Right? So the data shows that cultural accelerating commerce across multiple layers simultaneously. Right? So community validation is one, proof-led content is another, and the blending of kind of the physical and the digital experiences is another. So these, I'd say, are not soft signals that we're picking up. Culture doesn't just make people feel something, right? It gives them the social permission or the validation and the practical reassurance to act, right? So, question, Kylene. How are you creating content right now based upon that? And what narrative levers are you drawing upon? And what types of narratives do you think brands, including yours, still haven't cracked yet?
Sure. So, I mean, you know, the funnel collapse has, I think, never been more real than in Asia and maybe China especially, where you can discover a brand, validate, research, and then buy immediately on the spot. But I think the decision levers that the consumer have or hasn't necessarily collapsed as well.
Right.
And so we still need to take the consumer through those decision steps very deliberately. And actually, we do follow Google's YouTube See, Think, Do framework actually quite
Thank you.
deliberately. And we anchor a lot of content creation around what do we need to do to engage her when she's not thinking about the brand.
Yep.
And so for that, our platform is Courage to Be Real, which connects on a very human level. And then what do you need to do to drive consideration? And here we might partner with creators,
Yeah.
communities to really get validation and social proof.
Right.
And then what do we need to do at that point of purchase to seal the deal? So, I mean, decision steps have not changed.
I love that, and that's a great point, and we'll come back to that. But please, Erin, you first. Tell
No,
us.
look, I think the point around the funnel collapsing is a hyper-pertinent one right now. The way we kind of look at it is probably more of a flywheel than a funnel these days.
Okay.
And when executing effectively, right, there should be a push-pull versus something that just is like, starts with a broad intention, ends with a single outcome. And I think this flywheel is kind of, it flies its best, I suppose, when there is a bridging between digital sentiment and physical reality, right? I actually want to bring up your point a minute ago about the bag charm concept of the campaign activation, right? That is such a good example of when a flywheel works, right, in a marketing construct, because you've essentially seeded something digitally, you've created a sense of excitement, interest, and appetite. Then you've created a pop-up experience so people can then physically connect with the thing they've seeded digitally, and then it starts to build momentum, right? So I think the more we can start thinking about it in more of a cyclic way versus, and a continuum, versus, I mean, a funnel is designed to literally spit one thing out.
Yeah.
And that is no longer what the intent of marketing or the reception of marketing should be.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think the big takeout for me from hearing both of you is that what we shouldn't do is conflate the ability to purchase something immediately because it's underpinned by technology versus the actual human decision-making process, which still requires validation and proof, right? That's the key.
And at the end of the day, the point of control should reside with the consumer,
Absolutely,
right? As opposed to the custodian.
Yeah, no, wise words. Okay, so our fifth and last question. So most brands assume that entertaining, I'll say inverted commas, entertaining content is enough, right? That's the brief. Develop some entertaining content for me. But our research suggests otherwise. So entertainment alone does not move people to act, is what we're validating here. So what drives behavior is a couple things: practical value, empowerment, realistic guidance. So in simple terms, content that helps somebody do something, understand something, or feel capable of doing something is actually what we should be driving towards. So the brief shouldn't be, give us some entertaining content. So question, Kylene, the temptation in culture is to be entertaining rather than meaningful. So for brands like Coach and Kate Spade, for example, where territory is expressive luxury, how do you hold on to a distinctive brand point of view when platform pressure is always kind of towards what's popular rather than what's generally or genuinely ownable to you?
This is a great question, and I think something that we have to deal with all the time because the temptation is so present. Platforms will reward, like the algorithm will reward what's popular, what's entertaining. But sometimes if I think about my own human behavior, I can like and engage a piece of content that doesn't, I'm entertained in the moment, but it doesn't move me towards the brand in a powerful way. And so I think the challenge to maintain distinctiveness is almost distinctiveness as refusal.
Okay.
And it's a little bit of a discipline because you have to be clear what are the trends that you will not play in and what are the few things that you will play in and play in it in a very outsized, scalable way so that you get the impact. I think fragmentation is the biggest challenge and the biggest risk because the more messages you fragment, maybe even the more platforms you fragment, you kind of lose that scalable impact, which is so important.
I love that. Constraint is a good thing. Rewards creativity. So Aaron, the assumption that algorithms reward attention, the data says that, but what is your point of view and your advice? What do you have for brands that are trying to build content that kind of does both?
Well, yeah, the entertainment piece is interesting, right? So if done wrong, entertainment is purely transactional, right? Whereas connection is personal, right? And it should feel like the heart of what you're trying to do. I think the inconvenient truth about social, for the most part, is that we talked about virality just a second ago, but the way I look at it is virality wins the feed but loses the conversation.
Interesting.
I love that.
And if we don't think about, and we talked about storytelling a minute ago, if we don't think about what is the goal, and remember, a conversation is a dialogue, right, between somebody who's intending to engage with a brand and the brand itself, whether that is carried by a creator or otherwise, but it's a conversation, right? And so it needs to be two-way. People need to feel a sense of connection. It is about authenticity and making sure you get it right. But where, again, we've seen brands get this wrong is not having the right areas not to go versus we're going to try everything, right? Having a good sense of discipline, a good sense of guiding principles that you'll focus on. Because I think it can be very easy to fall into the trap of trying to do too much versus be specific.
Yeah.
But I would say, mate, just bring it back to the storytelling aspect every time. It's like if you're telling the right story, if you're enabling others to tell that story on your behalf, I mean, any one of us that's a marketer, works in an agency, the minute something about what you do is told by someone else in a positive way, it has so much more impact than if you've said it yourself.
For sure.
And that's the value of where this kind of storytelling piece comes
Yeah,
from.
that's the power of storytelling, I suppose. Wise words. I love that point. Okay, so we got one last bonus question, which is actually a bit of a bonus question for the audience. And we'll start with you, Aaron, this time.
Okay.
So, what's your personal tip for staying close to the edge of culture?
Staying close to...
Edge of culture. How do you
Staying
keep
close to
engaged?
it.
What inspires you? What do you seek inspiration from?
So, I have this dream that one day, with all of the technological innovation that's taking place in our industry right now, that marketing will move at the speed of culture and that we will be able to catch things as they happen. And it could be as simple as you've got a wonderful agent that's sitting on the back end of the assets that you have that is just adapting that content to meet whatever that interest looks like at that point in time, that still pulls down from your master. Like, I have this vision that maybe, and it will happen soon, I hope, but I feel like in order for us to be successful in this game right now, we need to be moving at that speed.
Right.
And I think culture has the velocity we've never seen before, and we're always in catch-up mode. What would it look like if we were running alongside things as they were happening versus chasing the dream?
Love it. Kylene, last word to you.
I mean, I would say abundance of attention is ever present.
Right.
At the same time, distinctiveness has never been more difficult coming from a brand standpoint.
Yeah.
And so I think our job as brand builders, we need to be constantly curious about culture, but also very, very razor sharp and clear in what's the consumer truth, how does it link to the cultural phenomenon, and really work on that. Because I think when culture and attention connects with conviction and clarity about how the brand can help, that's ultimately what drives growth.
Love it.
Can I add one more, Clay? Is that okay?
Yeah, please do, yeah.
I also think we've got to collectively up our risk appetite. Be bold, a little bit braver in terms of what happened. A lot of the feedback that's come out of the Palais this week is this intention to be a little bit more risky. But from a leadership perspective, that comes with the responsibility of affording your teams the luxury to be a little bit more risky, right?
Yeah.
I think we've been adverse for a really long time. And I think now's the time, there's no time left to kind of play the old game. I think we've got to get a little bit risky, a little bit more daring with what we do, and have safety in failure. Because if we don't experiment, we can't innovate. If we can't innovate, we can't win. So,
love that. We'll leave it with, I think we've got 4 C's, by the way, I've just collected. So there is the clarity, there's the conviction, you're saying, clarity of insight, there's the creative bravery, and there's a consistency to move forward. So love that. Yeah, you've just coined the 4 C's for us. We're going to move forward with that. And with that, we're just on time. What I want to say is, on that final note, move over it, yeah. Huge thanks to both of our guests. Again, Kylene Campos, Senior Vice President, Brand and Growth Asia for Tapestry. Please give her a round of applause. And Aaron Buckstein, Australia New Zealand Director and APAC Executive Sponsor for Agencies and Partners, YouTube. Please also give him a round of applause. Thank them both for joining me. By the way, scan the QR code for the in-depth research that you can download. It's free to download. It gives you all the stats and details and whatnot. And then with that, I think we'll close the panel. Thank you very much for your attention.